town of Eldridge, the Thompson house stood at the end of a long, winding road, its weathered facade hiding decades of secrets. The townsfolk often whispered about the place, especially about the basement, a dark, cramped space that seemed to absorb light, creating an unsettling shadow that lingered in its corners. When the Thompsons moved in, they were excited. The house was a steal, and they loved the vintage charm it exuded. But as autumn deepened and days grew shorter, unease crept into their lives. It started with the whispers. At night, Sarah, the eldest daughter, would hear faint voices echoing from the basement. "It's just the pipes," her father would say, dismissing her fears. But she felt it, a presence, heavy and watching. One evening, curiosity got the better of Sarah. The whispers beckoned her, soft and insistent. Armed with only a flashlight, she descended the creaking stairs. The basement was colder than she expected, and the air felt thick, almost suffocating. Shadows danced across the walls, twisting and curling in unnatural ways. Suddenly, her flashlight flickered, plunging her into darkness. Panic surged, and she swung the beam around, catching a glimpse of something, a figure standing at the far end of the room. It was just a shadow, she told herself. But the shadow didn't move like a normal shadow, it seemed to pulse, breathing in the dark. "Who's there?" she called, her voice quivering. The whispers grew louder, swirling around her like a dark mist. "Come play with us," they cooed, a chorus of disembodied voices that chilled her to the bone. With trembling hands, she turned to flee, but as she ran, the shadow stretched out, reaching for her. In a moment of pure terror, she felt cold fingers brush against her ankle, and she stumbled, falling to the ground. The whispers escalated into frantic laughter, echoing in her mind. Desperate, she crawled back toward the stairs, the beam of her flashlight dancing wildly until it finally landed on the shadow, illuminating its shape. It wasn't just a figure, it was a multitude of faces, twisted in anguish and longing. They seemed to merge and shift, trapped in the dark, their eyes pleading for release. Sarah scrambled up the steps, heart pounding. She burst into the living room, breathless and wide-eyed. Her parents were watching television, oblivious to the horror she had just faced. "It's just my imagination," she whispered to herself, but the memory of those faces haunted her. Days turned into weeks, and the shadow grew bolder. It would flicker across the walls during the day, and the whispers turned into calls, soft, enticing, promising companionship. Sarah tried to ignore it, but every night, the calls grew more insistent. One stormy night, the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. Lightning illuminated the basement door, and for the first time, she felt an overwhelming urge to go back down. The voices surged in her mind. "You belong with us." With trembling resolve, she opened the door and descended the stairs once more. The darkness enveloped her, but this time, she didn't hesitate. As she stepped into the cold air of the basement, the shadows coalesced around her, forming a mass of writhing darkness. "Join us," they whispered, 1,000 voices mingling into one. The room spun, and Sarah felt herself being pulled into the void. She tried to scream, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness. The next morning, the Thompsons awoke to find the basement door ajar. Concerned, they searched for Sarah, calling her name. Hours passed, but she didn't answer. Panic set in, and they finally mustered the courage to look in the basement. As they descended the stairs, the air felt heavy, thick with an unshakable dread. They found nothing, only an empty space, the shadows lingering in the corners like old ghosts. Days turned into weeks, and the Thompsons moved away, leaving the house behind. The townsfolk continued to whisper about the shadow in the basement, but the truth was never spoken aloud. For in that house, a new darkness had taken root, and it waited patiently for its next visitor, ready to call them into the depths of despair.